Hello, I'm Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor of Spiked, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined down the line by Joe Bartosch, a regular Spike contributor and author of the upcoming book Pornography. Welcome, Joe.
Hello, lovely to be here.
So, Joe, I really wanted to talk to you about this row that has broken out between the Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling and Emma Watson, one of the stars of the film adaptation. She plays Hermione Granger. Now, it might be known that some of the Harry Potter stars do not see eye to eye with the author. J.K. Rowling famously has gender-critical views. Many of them have made very overt trans activist statements. And in this latest statement, J.K. Rowling has hit back, essentially accusing Emma Watson of being ignorant of how ignorant she is, and even suggesting that she sided with a movement that has called for J.K. Rowling's assassination. First of all, what's your immediate take on this?
I suppose my immediate take is just how refreshing it is to see a bit of honesty around this. So, J.K. Rowling, perhaps Emma Watson might have expected her to go, oh, that's okay, I love you too, or something sort of suitably saccharine. So for her to hit back with something honest, which is something I think you rarely see in Hollywood, has been a delight. I think she's just so sort of pithy and on it, and it has been, these celebs dribble out talking points as if it's part of their personal brand. They don't actually care about anything, I don't think. I don't think they care about Palestine any more than they do the environment or whatever the hell else. It is just part of their personal brand. So to have somebody who actually has integrity and thinks before she tweets or writes or says anything about these issues, she's been mulling over this for a long time, is incredibly refreshing.
And one thing I really took away from it was essentially J.K. Rowling was accusing Emma Watson of holding luxury beliefs. These are beliefs that don't impact you. How do you think that works in terms of the trans discussion? Is this something that affects, say, working class women more than it does Hollywood actresses?
Oh, yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. I mean, apart from anything else, it's not. It's not, she's never going to be a shop assistant and have to turn away a hulking great bloke from a women's changing room. She's never even going to have to enter a women's changing room. She's never going to be in a prison. She's never going to be on an NHS hospital ward that's mixed sex. She's never going to have any of these ordinary challenges that, a lot of us do. And for her to sort of it's just so grotesque and performative to hold these very easy luxury beliefs, It is insulting, frankly, and yeah, it's good to see her called out on it.
And one thing that has always struck me about J.K. Rowling and the way she's approached this issue is that she has been incredibly calm and measured and thoughtful, and yet she's still painted as this evil, transphobic monster. She's just constantly spouting bigotry. I mean, that's just nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah, I think she holds a belief that is a so-called belief, a belief that's common to pretty much anyone, with eyes and a functioning brain, that people can't change sex. I mean, it's just obvious. The fact is she's got the guts to say it, which is rare for a woman of her status. I mean, it really makes me angry in a way when women have to use personal experience to explain why they object to men in women's spaces, for example, and have to talk about their own, I don't know, in her case, obviously she was a victim of domestic abuse. She shouldn't have had to have said that. She shouldn't have had to disclose that to make the pretty obvious point that men have no right in women's spaces. That shouldn't be controversial, yet she had to sort of couch it in those personal terms. And anyone who read that essay she wrote, this when she came out, if you like, as gender critical, it was beautiful, it was powerful, and it was rooted in her personal experience. And to have these sort of intellectual lightweight idiots sort of making vacuous statements, trans rights are right, it's just so disrespectful apart from anything else. Emma Watson owes her career to J.K. Rowling, so it's really sort of what an ingrate.
Definitely. And what's interesting is that since J.K. Rowling wrote that essay, there have been some major developments, particularly in the UK. We had the Cass review exposing just how nonsense the claims are around transgender children. We've had the Supreme Court affirming that women have a right to single-sex spaces. And yet it seems as if, Joe, the activists just are completely unmoved by any of this.
It's mad, isn't it? I mean, I sort of, the other day there was a protest outside a prison, a women's prison. where they are housing men in a separate wing. And I was like, oh my God, so we have protesters protesting for the law to be upheld. That is how deep the rot is. That is how sort of transgenderism turns institutions against themselves and against the very things they should be doing. So you have rape crisis centres re-traumatising victims because they've employed, like Midrow Woodra in Scotland, they've employed a man. You know, you have organisations that ought to, for example, even journalism, our own profession, you know, you have journalists lying and not being accurate. And it's sort of, it's so corrosive, and it really sort of turns everything against sort of the values that unite us all, or ought to unite us all in a civilized society. It is so deeply egotistical, and well, my personal belief is it comes from pornography, but that's another matter. But you know, the fact is, it's so antisocial as a movement, and I think many of the sort of adherents of it as well are vicious. So for J.K. Rowling to say, fairly graceful, really, given what she's been up against over all these years. I mean, she had somebody threatened to pipe bomb her house. She's had sort of, you know, she gets regular rape and death threats, as did even, you know, when Kirshner Faulkner, the former chair of the EHRC, came out and sort of was very measured, but said, oh, maybe, you know, we ought to talk a little bit more about this. She was immediately threatened. Hilary Cass has had to get security. Rosie Duffield has had to get security. Every woman who speaks up about this will get and death threats, because these are unhinged men. Yeah. So yeah, how lucky for Emma Watson that she has the facility to do that.
and yeah, just to, you know, sort of carry on with that point, I mean, it's not just the violence, it's the misogyny in so many of these threats. It clearly it is directed far more at women than it is men. What do you make of that? Can you? I mean, I don't think you can separate trans activism from misogyny.
No, I mean, it is, well, as it was saying, my pet obsession, which I probably ought to rephrase, is pornography. And I think a lot of these men base their stereotype of what it is to be a woman on the porn that they watch. So basically, to be a woman, to be used by men. And I think when that sense of self is threatened, they become really aggressive and very violent. And it's almost taken like, you know, an assault on their personhood, an assault on, say, you know, even the mildest thing like misgendering is suddenly cast as something that somehow is corrosive to the very soul. Whereas actually, let's be honest, it's a woman saying no to a man with a fetish. And of course they're going to go nuts.
And finally, what's your sort of outlook on where we are with the trans debate now? Are you optimistic, pessimistic? Will the J.K. Rowling view win out? There seems to be a lot of victories, but, you know, there's never a final victory, I guess. What's your broad take on that?
I think my broad take is everybody knows deep down that it's common sense. I think even the men who pretend to be women know deep down that it's nonsense, which I think is behind the anger, as I say. I mean, we couldn't have done more. We couldn't have had more victories, and yet we are still having to fight this in institutions because, apart from anything else, we've now had generations going through school who have been taught that gender identity is a real thing and that it's sort of sacrosanct. And also, while we might have defeated it in the UK, it has been pushed by very powerful non-governmental organisations around the world. And it's been bankrolled by some, you know, probably quite well-intentioned, but some hugely rich philanthropists who have been pushing it because they think it's the next human rights struggle, if you like. And I think that will take decades to unpick.
Jo Bartosch, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.